Hi, Leo Sun and Rising. This is a video for the transit of Jupiter in the sign of Pisces, which is currently underway as we end the month of May 2021, or at least as I record this, towards the end of May 2021. And next month in June, June 20th to be exact, at the time of the summer solstice, Jupiter goes retrograde, and it is going to stay in Pisces until the end of July, and then it goes back into your opposite sign of Aquarius. So the eighth house is the house right after that seventh house of committed partnership, which you have been experiencing Jupiter in for months now. And Jupiter is going to be in Pisces, like I said, until the end of July of 2021. And then it makes a reappearance after Christmas of 2021 in late December of this year and goes full time into Pisces at the end of 2021 and for a long stretch of time in 2022. So for Leo Sun and Rising, that eighth house is where this transit takes place. The eighth house in the universal chart is ruled by Scorpio, and Scorpio's rulers are Pluto and Mars, and so those elements play into what the eighth house represents. The eighth house is a house of transformation. And one of the biggest, or probably the biggest, I should say, is the area of death. And that's the ultimate transformation. But anything where someone, experiences personal alchemy, I like to use the word alchemy because I really do think that it's going to be an improvement. You are going to take some raw material that is not necessarily that considered that coveted, and turn it into gold. And so if you think about that in terms of the personality, in terms of the person's spiritual growth, this is a water house, so it's a very internalized kind of a place. This is the house of the shadow self. Those things about all of us that if we're not conscious enough, we can easily disavow, shove under the rug, and close off from. This is the house of trauma, so sometimes trauma will do that, will shut people off from these kinds of horrible feelings as a protective device, and it actually serves a purpose. It's just that after the immediate crisis is over with and the person doesn't need that same level of protection, it can become like this, almost like a defense mechanism where the person doesn't deal with some of the underlying issues in their life. This is the house of intimacy, so sexual matters are part of the eighth house. And Leo, you rule the fifth house, which is also connected to sex. I had a little bit of a debate, or maybe an argument, maybe it got a little bit testy, with somebody who was talking about the fifth house, and I wasn't really familiar with the fifth house and sex. I was familiar with the eighth house. I assumed that was the only house. It turns out that the fifth house that you rule is recreational sex. So the fifth house is the house of pleasure, and recreational sex fits under that header, if you will, filing under that category. But actually, the fifth house is also conceiving children. So I've made this point before that I really feel like the eighth house should be connected to conceiving children, since it is such a heavy thing to do in terms of the serious nature of it. It's not fun and games. So, but in any case, when Jupiter transits the eighth house, it's like Santa Claus coming to town. And, the eighth house, by the way, is also the house of psychology. So I talked about trauma, I talked about the shadow. And so psychology allows you to penetrate some of those defenses of other people and really, tune into what they're really all about, what makes them tick, and things like that. But even with yourself, this can be the case, Leo. And when Jupiter is transiting this house, you can have this great affinity for psychology can really help you during this time. So if you are one of those people who have tried to go it alone and you feel like you would benefit from some sort of therapy, talk therapy, or what have you, maybe marital counseling, because you have Saturn in Aquarius for the next couple of years. So Saturn is, kind of making things more apparent of whether or not there are problems in a relationship. And so you can just benefit from these kinds of insights. The eighth house, by the way, is also the house of the occult. And they didn't really mention that on that I saw on cafeastrology.com, which I want to give a shout out to now because they gave me such great, things to put down as part of my list. But, like everything else, they probably are picking and choosing, and it's just like I picked and chose which ones I wanted to really talk about. So I would say that you benefit from and your life is expanded by studying the occult. And some people get a little bit nervous at the word occult, which means hidden. Astrology and the tarot are said to belong to this category. I don't know if I would agree 100% because they are not that hidden. But apparently, they're looking at it from a traditional standpoint. Um, Anything that has to do with the secrets of the universe. The eighth house is also the house of conspiracy theories, so you can find yourself going down that rabbit hole because, just looking for one thing, eighth house can be research. And so anything like this hidden, forbidden knowledge, that is totally eighth house, and it can be irresistible in terms of trying to figure out, what's going on with something. Now, in terms of a relationship with a significant other or somebody where you would be having intimacy, intimacy is favored at this time. And, like if you are married, your partner's financial situation could improve, and then you would benefit from that in a kind of a indirect way. If they get a big raise, obviously that's going to come back on you in a very positive way. The eighth house can be a house of issues that are connected to power, and you can pass the test where you're able to have a positive relationship with it. Leos that are imbalanced can be kind of like petty tyrants, where they are wanting to be the center of attention. When you think about the sun that rules you, the sun is like the center of our universe, as human beings. So it stands to reason that a Leo person wants to radiate his or her energy on as many people as possible. So if you have been trying to figure out some sort of way to be creative or to somehow, well, I mean, when I say creative, I mean, I'm really talking about being able to financially capitalize on some of these things. If you are a Leo person who really connects with astrology or the tarot or both, you might start your own business, perhaps. That you're doing something along the lines of what I'm doing, and you um, are able to make money from it. Jupiter can be about money, by the way, but it also can be that it has a reverberating effect. It's, people really resonate with it, and you'd probably be really good at it from a performance standpoint because you're a natural actor. So I could see a Leo person hamming it up in front of the camera. Um, this is the eighth house, like I said, is trauma, and by uh, connection with that, what we would call like a crisis. And this is what traumas are, like some kind of like a life and death situation, or something that is an emergency. That's probably connected to Mars, because a lot of times people who have certain like conjunction between Mars and Pluto or something like that, they might be kind of daredevils who, kind of test fate with some of the things that they do. It's funny, I haven't really heard about anyone that I know who has taken up motorcycle riding. When I was a teenager, there were people in the neighborhood who had a motorcycle, and I never rode it, and the guy ended up dying in a crash. And I think it was just because I was afraid, I felt like it might be very dangerous to ride a motorcycle. And it turned out that this man did lose his life, so it was very sad. So the point being that at crisis time is so many means different things to different people, but you can be that rock for other people who might be going through something. And because you have this heightened ability in the area of psychology, this can affect your ability to see the truth in the situation, or the higher truth. Jupiter is like that. I mean, like the bigger picture. I think that's a better way of saying it. I didn't put that down here though, but I think that's the best way of putting it. And your money situation can improve. I mean, to the point of wealth, as I put down here. And this is because Pluto is actually associated with wealth. In the eighth house, I think I just mentioned, your partner gaining. And I mean, if you're with someone, obviously, that's the only time when it's relevant. But then you benefit from it, like I said, indirectly. Healing is favored. And this can be, it's funny, Q in sexual healing, Marvin Gaye. Sexuality and intimacy are things that you can make inroads on, and find a lot of ease and abundance in that. And so whether it's healing of the body or the psychological healing that allows a person to feel more comfortable around the issues of sexuality, but we would just say intimacy in general, because with sexuality, obviously that is not the ultimate form of intimacy, but it often symbolizes the emotional intimacy. And so, for somebody who has a history of abuse in this area, they may need to kind of get in touch with their shadow to be able to really look at it without being afraid. And this gives you, this Jupiter generosity gives you the ability to understand yourself psychologically better, as well as other people. And so even if you were the victim of some type of abuse that has made you have trust issues, Leo, you can even understand them, because a lot of times, since this is the house of Scorpio, I have found that people that have prominent Scorpio in their chart often seem to struggle with issues of forgiveness, that they hold a grudge. And this is kind of like something that I think is commonplace with all fixed signs, is that they have a hard time transcending certain wrongs that were done to them. And this can be very freeing for you, because you can, even somebody who did abuse you, if that did happen to you, you would be able to release that person from your negative thoughts. So it really is freeing yourself in a lot of ways. Now, they said something that I totally do not understand. If any of you, I know some of you are very well versed in astrology. If you can explain to me why a new car or home is featured, please do. The only thing I can think of is that, sometimes you buy a home. Well, a lot of times you don't just buy the home outright. You have a mortgage, and this can be like loans that you receive. So perhaps a car loan or a house loan, and then you're able to buy it even though you don't necessarily have all that money up front. But personal transformation is favored. The intimacy, as I stated. And, this can, in this particular area, just looking at from the practical standpoint, is that you can just keep doing you. If you are somebody who doesn't seem to need a lot of possessions, then that is something that is okay about you. And you don't have to go to the store and buy something cookie cutter to fit in with somebody else. I'm, trying to make a analogy or metaphor. Forget about that. That doesn't even make sense. But I'm just saying that you can be your own person and stand in your own power, personally transform your life, and yet still forgive others and get close to others, gain more, be more trusting, and that's a form of healing, and so on and so forth. I think I covered everything. So anyway, I hope that you enjoyed this, Leo. If you would like me to look at more areas of transits that are happening for you in the next year, and as well as analyze your chart, if that's something that interests you, I have different readings. I also have like a double extended reading called Deep Dive, which goes into more information, because they're hour-long readings combined for a special sale price. And you can find all my readings at the link below. I'm at rainamoonastrology.com. Thanks for listening. Take care. Bye.